did the maximum on the last one, and I'm trying to remember where I should have watched it because I kind of forgot where I started. Oh, I ended off with the origins of African psychiatry because I'm talking about my bullet points in relationship to an action plan. So an origin story. The origin story is the basis of any national or any nationality in relationship to their ethnicity, the shared genetic and mimetic traits that constitutes that ethnicity, and the nationality is developed from that origin story. You know, Europeans, their overall origin story is the biblical origin story, and then they have which is their metaphorical origin story. Then they have their scientific based origin story, which is, you know, man evolved in Africa and so on and so on, and moved to Europe, and the Europeans did this, and the Greeks did this, and this and that, and that, and that, and this and this and that, and this is our manifest destiny as the Western world to do this and do that. Is the particular origin story, and then parts of that origin story is shared among different aspects of the European peoples, and then there are, you know, the Hindu or Indian origin stories are found within, you know, the Hindu mythology and so forth and so forth, and then the actual Indian history. Aside with that, then the Jews, you know, find themselves at the basis of the biblical story narrative, and then, you know, find themselves meshed within the larger historical framework, and then they're separate, but they're not separate. You know, there's which is a problem. This dualistic idea of their origins, where there's this entirely metaphorical aspect of their origins, the Adam and Eve story, and then this scientific based origin story, which is, you know, the out of Africa evolutionary story. So there, which is basically a cosmology, you know, or the basis of the anthropological cosmology, you know, and rooting out of the, you know, the beginning of the universe cosmology, and that cosmology being the Big Bang and so forth, and being the standard, you know, being the scientific base, or the what they would call secular cosmology, and then you have the religious cosmology, which is the biblical cosmology, which is the, you know, the Genesis. So what we're working at doing is building a cosmology that is both scientific based, but also has metaphorical interpretations or articulations, so they could be better comprehended from a kinesthetic aspect, but they're still within the metaphorical explanation. There are still scientific or more scientific or upward causal metaphorical explanations of the downward causal explanation within the cosmology, both the anthropological cosmology and then the cosmic cosmology. You know, so I guess that's a geology, you know, a genealogy. And so the genealogical or anthropological narrative, we also have that aspect. And it's from this origin story that this origin story and the narratives that derive from the origin story, and the theory of how things came into being, metaphorical, loosely metaphorical and tightly metaphorical, or upward causally metaphorical and downward causally metaphorical. And I'm going to explain these things in more detail as some you know, as we go on. Then laid the groundwork for a national identity, and that national identity lies the groundwork for a cultural identity, and then a linguistic identity. Now we identify the national identity as more. We identify the cultural identity as Islam, and the linguistic identity as Arabic. Um, we can get even more detailed. Is like, okay, more El Merkadesh is the word that we utilize to describe the nation, our particular nation, nationality in relationship to more, which is, you know, just loosely translated, El Merkadesh means, you know, the black Moor, which we determined that there is a difference between, you know, Moors in relationship to the original Moor, and then those Moors that would adapt more or Mormon culture, and therefore become Moorish, like the Berbers. the Berbers would get their culture from the Phoenician Samaritans, who comprised the original Moors, which was an amalgamation of Amerindians or Sumerians who had been throughout the northeast African diaspora, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and so on, who got together, the Carthaginians and so on, who got together at the fall of the Roman Empire and referred to themselves as this new Almagrashian empire, or this empire of the Moors, who first influenced the Berbers. And that's why it's easy to see this multicultural Moor or Moorish culture, which is the culture that's influenced by the culture that was adapted by the original Moor, the Black Moor. And we're going to go through like the history of how these Moors developed and the actual data that supports the existence of these Moors. Like I was describing in the last video, there is a lot of high entropy data that Western science and academia draws from, or scholarship draws from, that their academia is developed upon, based upon the ethnic agenda of the European academia, or the European structure as a whole, government, politics, finance, and religion, which are all designed to maintain this white supremacy. And these are the kind of like ideas that we're going to be talking about, but we want to talk about this action plan. At first and foremost is, well, how do we start solving the problems of Black people? How, these simple problems. And these are the things that we need to do in relationship to solving these problems. Well, we all don't agree on more. We all don't agree on this thing called Islam. We all don't agree on, this language Arabic. We don't all agree on the origin story. Well, to a certain degree, we do. I mean, there's certain aspects of the story. It's called the narcissism of small differences. There's certain aspects of these of these things that we do agree on. There is a number of us who agree that we are Moors, and those who agree that we are Moors, who need to get together and make a council of Moors and start creating an argument for the larger group of African Americans to why we should identify ourselves as Moor. But first of all, we should get together as those who identify as Moor. And then there's a large degree of us who agree that our culture is Islam, be it rooted in the Saudi Arabian tradition or the North American tradition, and then we need to get together and we need to create a universal argument, be it the Saudi Arabian or the North American tradition, and what the North American tradition is and what the Saudi Arabian tradition is either of them valid or invalid by way of the evidence, not based upon the particular persons it benefits, but the overall reality that it supports. So these are the basics, and then as far as Arabic, that once you agree on the first two, Arabic is the reasonable outcome. So 1 and 1 adds 2, and I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, well, yeah, 1 and 1 adds 2, 1 and 2 adds 3. So the third component of language, Arabic, and we're suggesting a more Coptic-based Arabic, and not because Arabic itself is a dialect. The Arabic that's spoken frequently or heard frequently, even the religious format use of it is based in a dialect that's based from the original Coptic language, which is based in the demonic Medjugorje or the hieroglyphic language, which is where we want to go back to and develop this Coptic language. We want to create a Arabic's dialect that is specific to, so-called African Americans of, the North American wilderness, the lost foundation of Islam. See, there's the origin story, shared origin story, that we have an origin story that stems from Elijah Muhammad by way of the teachings of W.D. Muhammad, and then Master W.D. Muhammad, and then there's also the teachings of Noble Drew Ali, which have a great similarity to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. This not say they're causal, but say there's a super causal, and I can prove the nature of a super causal connection. And if there's a super causal connection, then that means it's embedded within our mimetic